Hi everybody, I'm Thomas from Backscatter, and in this video, I'm going to give you the rundown of the Backscatter TTL Flash trigger for Olympus OM system and Sony cameras. The Backscatter TTL Flash trigger is simple and easy to use and provides super accurate automatic flash exposures. Using Smart Control Optical TTL, all you have to do is aim your strobes and focus on composition and strobe positioning rather than changing power levels. In this video, we're going to cover the Backscatter Smart Control Optical TTL system, when to use TTL and when to use manual. We'll do a walk around of the trigger and go over installation and check out some of the advanced settings and features as well. Also, watch our Olympus OM system and Sony setup videos for specific camera settings linked below. So let's jump in and check it out. Let's start by explaining the type of TTL used by the Backscatter TTL Flash trigger. The Backscatter TTL trigger uses Smart Control Optical TTL, which is Backscatter's proprietary system. The Olympus OM system triggers are TTL compatible with the Mini Flash 2 and Hybrid Flash, while the Sony triggers are TTL compatible with the Hybrid Flash only. All Backscatter TTL triggers can fire most optical strobes manually. The Mini Flash 2 and Hybrid Flash offer two smart control modes. Standard SC mode is for wide-angle and general photography, while the SC macro mode is for close-up shooting like macro photography. Smart Control Optical TTL is so accurate it even works perfectly through a snoot. Both the Hybrid Flash and Mini Flash 2 will even warn you with a beep when you reach maximum output while using TTL. If the flash beeps and the resulting image is underexposed, get closer or adjust your camera settings to brighten the scene. Smart Control Optical TTL is so accurate since it functions as a direct line of communication between the camera and the flash. A computer-coded signal is sent from the flash trigger through the fiber optic cable to the strobe, resulting in an accurate automatic flash. This system works similarly to a fiber optic telecommunication network connecting the camera to the strobe. Smart Control Optical TTL offers the same level of accuracy as a direct electronic connection system, which uses electronic cables and bulkheads to link the camera and housing. However, Smart Control Optical TTL provides the added convenience and cost-effectiveness of fiber optic triggering. With this system, you can avoid the hassle of cleaning and greasing multiple O-ring connections, and you don't have to worry about bulkhead or cable leaks, and you can avoid the expense of purchasing electronic sync cables. It's important to note that Smart Control Optical TTL should not be confused with Slave or Mimic TTL. Slave TTL mimics the duration of the camera's built-in flash or the LED trigger. While Slave TTL can get you into the ballpark of an accurate exposure, it is not as consistent as a direct electronic connection or the Smart Control Optical TTL system used by the Backscatter TTL trigger. Since the Backscatter TTL trigger uses its own proprietary TTL language, it is not compatible with Slave TTL strobes. Now, let's talk about the advantages of using TTL. This is universal for all TTL systems, not just the Backscatter TTL trigger and Smart Control modes. Novices will easily be able to light their foreground using TTL. All you have to do is make sure your strobe is pointed at your subject, and you're all set. This takes the pressure off manually controlling your strobes, while you can focus on other fundamentals of photography, such as strobe positioning or changes in camera settings. For example, when shooting manually, you will need to manually change strobe power if your subject is moving closer or away from you. If the subject is coming closer, you'll need to decrease strobe power to keep the image from being overexposed. If your subject is moving away, you will need to increase strobe power in order to reach it at that further distance and to prevent the image from being underexposed. When using TTL, the flash will automatically adjust power to compensate for a moving subject with a correct exposure. TTL is also good for more experienced shooters, who will appreciate its accuracy and consistency for surprise encounters or when rapid camera setting changes are necessary. If you're rounding at a corner and are suddenly face-to-face with a subject like a reef shark, you might not have enough time to adjust strobe positioning, power, and camera settings if you're unprepared for this encounter. With TTL, flash power is adjusted automatically, freeing up more time for you to nail the shot during fleeting encounters. TTL works great for most situations, however, there are some cases when switching to manual flash power is required. This applies to all TTL systems, not just the Backscatter TTL trigger and smart control modes. Fortunately, it is easy to switch to manual when the scene demands it. To check out how easy it is to switch to manual, see our setup videos for using the Olympus OM system and Sony triggers linked below. TTL has one exposure for all strobes being used. If one strobe is closer to the subject than the other, you'll need to shoot manually, since the strobes will need to be set at different powers based on their distance. The closer strobe will need to be set at a lower power to not overexpose the image, and the further strobe will need to be at a higher power to make sure enough light reaches the scene. If you try to use TTL with your strobe set at different distances from the subject, one strobe will either be over or underexposed based on distance. Since TTL uses pre-flashes, it will trigger slower than a manual single flash. Using the Backscatter TTL trigger, you can get up to 3 frames per second when shooting in TTL, compared to over 30 frames per second in manual mode. If you're looking to capture as many frames as possible, manual is the way to go. There are 3 versions of the Backscatter TTL trigger. There are 2 universal versions, one for Olympus OM system and one for Sony, with a 3rd version for Sony full-frame Nauticam housings. The universal types are meant to fit into most housings, while the Nauticam version is custom designed to fit into Nauticam full-frame Sony housings. Now, let's take a look at the universal style trigger. At the front of the trigger, we'll find a USB-C port. This is how the trigger's built-in battery is charged using the included USB-C cable and where the LED trigger lights connect. The universal style trigger comes with either a single or dual LED trigger light. The single LED fits the optional fiber optic bulkhead, while the dual LED accommodates optical ports or the provided foam blocks. We'll cover the specifics on installation a little later on. The trigger has one switch and a button. The switch is to power the trigger on or off, while the button is used to check battery level. On the back of the trigger, you'll find 2 indicator lights. One light indicates battery level, while the other shows that the trigger is on. When the trigger is first powered on, or when the battery status button is pressed, the battery indicator light will flash 1 to 5 times to indicate battery level. Each blink indicates 20% increments of battery life. 5 blinks means the trigger is at 100% battery, with 1 blink meaning it is at 20% or less and should be charged. When the trigger is near dead, the indicator light will turn red, indicating that charging is required. The Sony trigger for Nauticam full-frame housings is identical in terms of controls and indicator light placement, but is custom fit and designed for Nauticam full-frame housings. The only difference is that this version has LED trigger lights built into the top of the trigger to line up with the optical ports on the Nauticam housing, rather than detachable LED trigger lights like the universal version. Overall, the TTL trigger has 13 hours of continuous runtime. The TTL trigger uses a power management system that puts the trigger in standby mode when the camera is off or asleep. This way, there is no wasted battery when your camera is not in use. This power management system allows the trigger to be used for several days without charging. Just make sure to check the battery status light before your next day of shooting. While charging the trigger, the status light will blink steadily. Once charging is complete, the light will be solid. The trigger takes 2 hours to fully charge when the battery is completely drained. But it would only take minutes to get a usable charge for a quick turnaround between dives. Here's a pro tip. Be sure to use the included USB-C cable for charging, as not all USB-C cables are compatible. Now, let's cover installing the TTL trigger into a housing. First, let's check out the universal trigger. The universal trigger is designed to fit into most housings with several different routes for installation. If your housing has optical bulkheads that accept LEDs, first plug the LED trigger lights into the bulkheads without the camera. Now, with the LED trigger lights held out of the way, install the camera. Then connect the LED USB-C connector to the trigger and install it on the camera's hot shoe. To uninstall, pull the camera out halfway and detach the TTL trigger from the hot shoe. Then, disconnect the USB-C cable and take out the camera. We recommend leaving the LED lights in the housing so it's ready for your next dive. If you have a housing with a clear window, you can use the included foam blocks to fit the LEDs. First, remove the adhesive backing, then line them up with the optical cable plugs on the opposite side of the window. Once lined up, stick the foam blocks into place. From here, you can plug in the LEDs and use the trigger. For a more custom fit with the universal trigger, you can use the additional LED bulkhead. This plugs into one of your housing's bulkheads and can accept an LED. To install the bulkhead, simply remove your bulkhead cap and replace it with the LED bulkhead. Then, plug your LED directly into the bulkhead from the inside of the housing. The Sony trigger for Nauticam full-frame housings is the simplest to install. First, slide the trigger into place on the camera's hot shoe, then install the camera into the housing, and with that, you're all set. Here's a pro tip. To ensure the best data transmission, only use 613 multi-core fiber optic cables with the Backscatter TTL trigger, such as those by Backscatter, Nauticam, and CNC. After the flash trigger is installed, you'll need to make some simple settings changes to your camera and flash. We created dedicated videos specifically on Olympus OM system and Sony cameras that'll walk you through these settings. You can find these videos linked below. The Backscatter TTL trigger also has advanced features such as flash exposure compensation and high-speed sync or HSS. And this is where we enter the nerd alert section of the video. Flash exposure compensation allows you to brighten or darken your image creatively. Brightening the image will give it more of a high-key appearance, while darkening it will make it look moodier. The hybrid flash and Mini Flash 2 do not use the power dial to control flash exposure compensation. Instead, this is conveniently handled through your camera's menu. Using this method, you don't have to place your flash's power dial in a neutral position, which is easily missed when switching between TTL and manual and can result in accidental flash compensation adjustments. High-speed sync, or HSS, allows you to shoot beyond the flash sync speed limit of your camera up to 1/8,000th of a second. High-speed sync allows you to shoot shallow depth of field macro images while maintaining a dark background thanks to the higher shutter speed this mode allows. The Olympus OM system TTL trigger is HSS compatible with the hybrid flash and Mini Flash 2, while the Sony TTL trigger is compatible with the hybrid flash, Mini Flash 2, and third-party HSS strobes such as the Retro Pro Max. With that, you should know everything you need to know about the Backscatter TTL Flash trigger. The TTL Flash trigger allows you to easily achieve accurate automatic flash exposures even through a snoot in one self-contained rechargeable package. You can now shoot Smart Control Optical TTL, HSS, and manual all with one trigger. Also, be sure to check out the link below for setup guides using the Olympus OM system or Sony cameras. If you have any questions, give us a call or send us an email. Remember, your purchases from Backscatter or any of our authorized dealers help us keep making more of these videos. We have free lifetime tech support on every purchase, we ship every day, and we dive, shoot, and service everything that we sell. I'm Thomas from Backscatter, and I'll see you next time.